Thank you for joining us for the Miami Valley Salute to Veterans. I'm Cindy LaPointe-Dafler, a volunteer host for the Miami Valley Communications Council. My husband was killed in Vietnam in 1969, and he was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Being around our veterans and talking with them, hearing their stories and their thoughts is my way of honoring my husband's legacy. We hope that hearing these memories from the veterans of our community will help us all better understand the dedication of those who have served. Today we're talking with Kyle. Could you pronounce your last name?
Kuta.
It is Kuta.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I just need to make sure. Of Troy, Ohio, an Army veteran who served from 2000 to 2024. He will tell us the story of his time in the military. Thank you for being here with us, Kyle.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
When you went into the military,
Mm-hmm.
Why did you go into the military? What made you decide that? And why did you choose the Army?
Oh, a lot of reasons. One of the big reasons is where I grew up is a small little farming community outside of South Bend, Indiana, just northwest corner of Indiana. So either you went into farming or you went into a factory to work. I didn't want that. And also I grew up with my grandpa, who was an Army veteran from World War II. And I seen a lot of the stuff that he had hanging up on the walls. Never really talked about it, but I seen a lot of the stuff. I had an aunt that was in Desert Storm for the Army.
Wow.
So kind of like a family legacy of, and I had other uncles that were in the Navy. Some were in the Marines. So we never really made it to the Air Force, but we made it to all the other branches. Mm-hmm. So I kind of always, in the back of my mind, that was always there. Then I remember in high school, they had a career day one day. I was sitting there and never really knew what branch I wanted, but kind of knew I was going there. And there was a Marine recruiter in there. And he was talking about, he was a canine dog handler for the Marine Corps. And he's telling the story about his dog finding drugs and stuff. And that was something I always wanted to do. So I was like, that's what I'm going to do. So I went in and talked to the Marine recruiter, and he said, I said, look, I only want to be military police. That's all I want to do. My grandpa was a sheriff's deputy. He was on the sheriff's posse, riding horses and stuff. And I remember watching cops as a kid growing up saying, that's what I want to do. And he said, well, we can't guarantee you that job, but if it's open. And the Army recruiter slid back in his chair out in the hallway and said, I'll guarantee you that job. And I said, okay.
Wow.
So then 24 years later.
Gosh. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. So your military occupational specialty, or MOS, mm-hmm. was...
Yeah, so I started out as military police. Did a couple different jobs within there besides just the normal military police. And then I got selected for recruiting, which is where I finished out my career.
Okay. Where did you go for your basic training?
Did Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for the whole time. It was basic training and my job training. It was straight through. Oh, it's been a long time. I think it was like 16 weeks straight through.
Yeah. Wow. Had you been away from home before?
Not by myself. I've gone on like I went with my grandpa out to Colorado one time to see my aunt. I was out there and been on trips and all that, but never by myself. That was the first time ever.
Oh, wow. What did you think about that?
It was exciting and scary at the same time. I was like, wow, I'm seeing, because I would never think of myself to go to Missouri. Like, that's just not in my mind. I'm here in Missouri and I'm seeing it, meeting people from all across the country that I never would have had that opportunity to.
Oh, wow. So a new experience. What did your family think about that? They were okay with it?
Well, just, like my dad was supportive of it, and everything. My mom, typical mother, scared, but at the same time, she's like, okay, hey, this is what he wanted to do. So
I understand that. And what did you think about basic training? Was it difficult at all?
It's one of it's one of those experiences where when you're going through it, you're like, man, I hate this. But now looking back at it, I'm like, oh, it's actually kind of fun. Mm-hmm. You didn't have to really worry about anything. They told you where you're going to be, when you're going to be there, what you got to wear when you get there, and they're going to tell you what you're going to do when you get there. All you got to do is just do what you're told. So it was kind of fun, but at the same time, it was a very big learning curve.
I'll bet. Anything happened that stands out in your mind?
Well, so the drill sergeants, they're notorious for making people do push-ups, and they always have different ways of saying that. You're there, you don't understand the terminology, you don't know, you know what a push-up is, but you don't know the other things. And I remember the one guy, I can't remember his name, but he was standing right in front of me, and he did something wrong, and the drill sergeant told him to beat his face. So he started slapping his face, and what are you doing? He's like, you told me to beat my face, drill sergeant. He's like, I meant to do push-ups. And I was like, oh, that's funny.
I'll remember that
Yeah.
one.
I was like, so now in my head, I'm like, okay, beat your face, means do push-ups. I'm like, all right, good to know.
And so you stayed there to take your advanced training as well.
Yep. Matter of fact, they said one day, they're like, congratulations, you're done with basic training. Tomorrow we start your job training. And it was the same drill sergeants all the way through.
Oh,
everything.
wow.
Yeah. So it's just get it all done at one time, I guess.
Oh, yeah. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
How was that different from basic?
They started to relax a little bit. Because like the basic training, they're there. Drill sergeants are there from the time you get up to the time you go to bed. And then throughout the night, there's always one there. Then as we progressed through our job training, they would start to go home, and it would just be us there, because now we'd proven that we can, we know what we got to do, and we're going to get it done.
What was the best part of your training?
I guess it was I never realized it, but looking back at it now, is the inter service training. Because when we went to some of our classes, we had Marine instructors, we had Air Force instructors,
Really?
There's a Navy instructor, so they all, they were all there teaching, because the Marines also do their military police training there.
Ah,
at the time they did, at least. I don't know if they still do, but so they had all the branches there were training, and they were able to teach us on our terminology, even though they weren't in the Army.
Oh, wow. Okay. What was the worst part?
The time, the length of time. 16 weeks is a long time when but when you're going through it. But when you go back and look, like, wow, that was a long time there.
How old were you?
I left a month after my 18th birthday.
Okay, so you were still 18.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Does any instructor stand out to you?
The two I still know was my own platoon drill sergeants. There's Drill Sergeant Carnes and Drill Sergeant McGaney. I know Drill Sergeant Carnes, he went on to do great things and continued to get promoted and everything like that. And I actually ran into Drill Sergeant McGaney when I ended up being stationed at Fort Hood. And when I was a traffic accident investigator, I ended up running into her. She just happened to walk into the MP station one day. I was like, hey, I know you. She said, don't you smile at me. I was like, oh. But she started laughing. She's like, no. And then she pulled me off to the side and, had an honest conversation. Hey, how are you doing? How's it going? What questions do you have? Anything I can help you with? That true mentorship.
Wow.
That you take a step back and is a total 180 from what I had known for 16 weeks.
Oh my God.
So that was pretty neat.
You qualified for equipment, I assume. Vehicles, radios, weapons.
Yep. Yeah, all kinds of just like every soldier, we qualify with a rifle. But then as MPs, we also qualified with our 9mm. We had the Mark 19, which is basically a grenade machine gun.
Oh.
The 50 cal. We had the squad automatic weapon, which is a machine gun. Plus, we did the hand grenades, we did the AT-4s, the missile launchers, we did the claymores, all that kind of stuff. Because one of the running jokes is MPs not only stands for military police, but it stands for multi-purpose. So they can use us for wherever they want. So we got a little training and all that. And then we got training in all the different vehicles, pretty much everything besides a tank.
Oh, wow. What was your first assignment after training?
I got sent to Fort Hood, Texas. And I was part of the 64th MP company out there. And they ran the gamut of all military police operations. We did law enforcement. We did our field work, everything. Anything that a military police officer does, that unit did it.
So what do you mean by field work then?
So part of it is like, a lot of people think military police is just in the patrol car and all that kind of good stuff. But we also do, I guess you call it our combat role, which is route security, route reconnaissance, route signing, which is marking the different routes so units come and through behind actually know, like, okay, this is where we're going. This is the road that we're on, all that kind of stuff. Clearing, part of search and detainee operations, prisoner operations, all that kind of stuff, which came in handy for my first deployment. All that, like I said, multi-purpose. Anything you could think of, this is what we were doing besides playing an instrument. That's about it.
Okay. How long were you there?
I got there in January 2001, and then I've actually left there in April 2008.
Wow.
Yeah, Fort Hood's one of those places where if you don't want to leave, you'll stay there because it's so big. And I liked it there. It's pretty nice.
Did it get pretty hot?
Yeah, it's a little warm in the summer.
Now, and you're from Ohio, is that right?
Northwest Indiana.
Northwest Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
So you were used to a little cooler weather.
Yeah. It's I'd never really experienced 100 degrees before. That hit, I was like, whoo.
What a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Where did you go from there?
While I was there, like I said, I did a couple different jobs. Because I did the 64th MP Company for a while, and then we deployed to Afghanistan right after 9/11 happened. Processed the detainees that they had and transported them from Kandahar to Camp X-Ray in Cuba, which was a lot of time on an airplane. And then when I got back from that, they said, hey, anybody want to go and go on to a specialized part of the military police world? So I was like, yeah. So they offered me to go into traffic management and accident investigation course, which is a 3-week-long school. Ironically, it's down at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. Again, that inter-service training. Everybody's there. So I did that for 2 years, investigating anything from a small little fender bender all the way up to fatality traffic accidents.
Wow.
And then got done with that. They said, okay, hey, you can go back to doing MP. So I went. Luckily, I got sent back to the 64th MP Company. So I was kind of like knew everybody there already. And they were gearing up to deploy to Iraq. This is about 2004.
Wow.
And they had just gotten back, and they were turning around, gearing right back up. So I went with them, deployed them, and then I came back, and they said, hey, you want to go do something different? Yeah, sure. Then I got my dream job. I was sent to the kennels to become a canine officer. And it was back in the 178th. So I spent time in 2 different units, but back and forth. So I was kind of, but then I did that for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and then deployed again as a dog handler, which is a totally different experience than everybody else. But when I got back from that deployment, that's when they said, like, hey, you're going to recruiting. And I was like, do I have a choice? And they said, no. And I was like, okay, fair enough.
Wow.
So then I left there and went to recruiting school in 2008 and then continued on from there.
So do you know why they chose you for recruiting?
No, they just, there's certain parameters that they have that you have to meet certain qualifications, and you're just in a big database, and they say like, hey, we need this many people. So they go through the list and they said, here you go.
Here
so
you are.
I was like, all right, it's something that everybody gets to do. So I was kind of like glad, and they kind of mess with you a little bit, because when you get the orders, the drill sergeant school and the recruiting school used to be at Fort Jackson. So when you got orders, it said drill sergeant / recruiting school, because they're all under the same umbrella for the schoolhouse.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to be a drill sergeant. I was like, okay. I was like, yeah. And I got there and they said, no, you're going to recruiting. I was like, oh, you guys need to reword that welcome letter.
You thought you had a chance.
Yeah, and I was like, all right, well, but it worked out. So.
Oh my gosh. Did you enjoy that?
The recruiting side, it's like any other job you have.
Okay.
You're going to have your ups and downs. And if you walk in, like my grandpa told me before I left base training, he's like, if you wake up in the day and you go, I hate this, he's like, you're going to have a bad day. He's like, but if you wake up and you're like, well, it's a new day, what's going, he's like, you'll be all right. So that's the way I just took that with me.
Oh, that's great. Mm-hmm. That's good advice. So where were you a recruiter?
I originally started in Central Tennessee, just out a little east of Nashville, between Nashville and Knoxville. And then from there, I went to Indianapolis, and then moved to a little bit south of Indianapolis, southeast of Indianapolis. and then went back to Tennessee down by the Chattanooga area. And then from there, they sent me to the schoolhouse. I was an instructor there for a while. Left there, went to State College, Pennsylvania, and then came to Dayton, and then retired from here.
You said the schoolhouse.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's where they teach recruiting. It's at Fort Knox, Kentucky. It's where anybody that, like I said, where I went to Fort Jackson, they moved it to Fort Knox, Kentucky. Anybody that gets selected to go on a recruiting duty, you go there for basically 8 weeks. They say 7 weeks and 4 days, but I'm like, really?
Yeah, let's just call it what it is.
Yeah, it's 8-week course where they teach you recruiting, how to do it, the different forms involved, what's the process to get somebody that's, walking on the street to get them into the Army and basic training.
Gosh, that's a big responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah, they say it's, because if we don't do our job, we don't have the soldiers to do what they need to do for national security and all that. So if you look at the big picture, it's a big national security, national defense
absolutely
requirement.
Gosh, what are your other recollections? Did you have anything that stood out to you as far as recruiting goes? A particular person that you remember?
Oh, I remember. There's so many. There's still some that I talk to.
I wondered about that.
Yeah, just to this day. I don't know, every holiday I send out probably 50 or 60 text messages, like just past month, I was like, hey, happy Veterans Day, copy, paste, just send them out to people just that I served with, that I still maintain contact with. And there's, like I said, I could open my phone and just, like the wheel of, the Price is Right wheel, just, through my phone, just all kinds of contacts. I've had, like I said, there's not really one mentor that I've had in particular. I've had several, and I've always tried to find that one no matter where I went. I found that one, whether it be a peer or a superior, that like, hey, you're doing something right. I like what you're doing, and I'm trying to ask you for guidance and opinions.
Wow. If you're just joining us, this is Miami Valley Communications Council Salute to Veterans podcast. I'm your host, Cindy LaPointe-Dafler, and today we're talking with Army veteran Kyle Kuta. You weren't actually in combat, but you were in a zone, in the combat zone. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was in, we were in Kandahar, Afghanistan in January 2002.
Right.
I remember flying in and seeing a red streak past the window, and I was like, what was that? And they're like, oh, they're just shooting RPGs. I'm like, you said that way too calmly. It was one of the crew chiefs on the plane. And then my second deployment was to Baghdad. Part of it was in Baghdad, part of it was in Taji, from 2005 to 2006. Then I went back later in 2006 to 2007, and I was up in Balad. That's what it was. Okay. Air Force Post. Yeah, doing K9 operations up there.
Okay. What did you think about the K9s? I love the idea.
That was definitely ranks up there as one of my favorite times. Because essentially I came into work, I played with the dog for a couple hours, did about an hour's worth of paperwork, and that was it.
Really?
Yeah. Because everything with the dog is the game to them. They don't.
Yeah.
Like when I first got to the kennels, they said, hey, the kennel master who's in charge of all the dogs, and Fort Hood being one of the largest kennels, took me through, and they're like, hey, we're just going to walk through the kennels and see how the dogs react to you, because that's how they pair it up. And we were walking through, and then she was like, well, have you ever thought about, if you want to do narcotics or if you want to do an explosive dog, and I just got back from Iraq, and I told her, I said, look, I found enough explosives without trying to. I was like, I don't want an explosive dog because I don't want to try and find explosives, No. I was like, I'll take narcotics. So we walked up and down there, and then they ended up hooking me up with my first dog, Rex. He was an older dog, but very, very loyal. So loyal that one of my good friends, Sergeant Ide, had previously had him. It was his handler, and we call it drop leash, is when you stop working with a dog. And like, you could not get even this close to Sergeant Ide when he was Rex's handler, because he'd be jumping up on you, because you can't get inside that bubble. Very protective. 2 days after I dropped his leash, walked by the kennel and Rex started growling at him because he feels betrayed.
Oh.
So then once you build that bond with them, they're definitely very protective if that's their demeanor. Most of them are. So I was lucky enough to get him. He was like an older dog. He'd been through several different handlers, so I was able to learn a lot from him on how to where to position myself during different commands and doing searches and all that kind of good stuff.
Wow.
So that's kind of neat. And then they brought in a brand new, we call them green dogs, fresh from their schoolhouse, their doggy schoolhouse. And then they said, "Hey, you're going to certify on this dog, and then you're going to deploy." And I was like, "Okay." But that was Roni, and we had some really good times. He definitely had a personality. Kind of a smart butt. Yeah, I definitely had some good stories about him.
Give me one.
Okay. Well, he had a thing with water bottles. He loved to chew on water bottles. And I think it was just the sound it makes when he crunches it, So when we deployed, and part of my job there was base security. So I'd go around and do perimeter checks and everything, and then there was an area where civilian contractors were. So I'd have to go in there and do searches and stuff, make sure they weren't bringing in contraband and all that kind of stuff. And I was walking around, and two of the male civilian contractors came up and they said, "Hey, can we pet your dog? It's a touch from home for him,
Mm-hmm.
So I had been with Rolling long enough. I would tell him, "Hey, go make friends." So he would go up to people and he'd let them pet him. But I told him, I said, "Hey, just don't touch his ears. He's very sensitive about his ears." So they're like, "Okay." So they're rubbing his back and everything, and he's leaning up against them and having just a good old time. Well, the one guy had a bottle of water, and over there they get the big liter bottles of water, and he was looking at it, just following it, and the guy's like, "Oh, you want water? You want water bottle?" And I was like, "Hey, he's got to think about his water bottles. Just hold on." And he's like, "Oh, okay." So I was like, "All right, Ronnie." I was like, "Come on, let's go," and stuff. And the guy's still like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa." Ronnie took one more step. He whipped around before I could even know, and he bit the bottom of the water bottle, and it was full. So he put two puncture holes in it, so the water was just draining out the side, and he whipped around and tried it off like,
"Yeah, I showed you."
Yeah, just kind of stuff. And I was like, "You're a jerk, dude." But he had that personality that he was just like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get the last laugh."
Oh, that is so cool. How long were you with him?
I was with him about a year or so, and then when I got picked on recruiting, the dogs stay at the kennels there. You don't take them with you.
Sure.
So then he ended up getting picked up by another handler that I knew when I left, and I talked with him a little bit as I left. He's like, "Hey, he's doing this. What is that?" And I'm like, "That's his quirk." Another one with him is we would have duty called kennel care. It's 24 hours, and you were stuck at the kennels, and you basically took care of the dogs when everybody else wasn't there. You'd feed them at night and stuff, and you'd spray out their kennels and make sure that they were good, shut the lights off. And at the time, my oldest son now, he was 4 or 5 months old, or whatever.
Oh, wow.
That times you. And so you could have people come in and see it. You didn't have to be there. It wasn't completely secure. So my wife would bring me dinner, and he was sitting there, and I had Roni in there, and I told him, I was like, "Speak," and speak. And my son thought that was just the funniest thing. He laughed so hard he threw up and stuff like that. And then of course Roni's looking like, "I didn't do it. I'm like, so, but yeah, he just had that personality that he was a people pleaser, but then at the same time, when it was time to work, it was time to work. He came one time at Fort Hood. He came about 5 feet from having his first bite on a subject. It just so happened that somebody else seen him first.
Oh, wow.
Seen the subject first. I was like, "Oh, you guys couldn't wait 30 more seconds," but yeah, he was definitely a good partner to have.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm sure that the handlers are they're affected by having to leave their dog.
Oh yeah.
As the dog is affected by losing the handler.
Yeah, there's some that don't really care. They're just like, whatever,
The handler,
the dogs.
The dogs.
Yeah. But most of the time, the handlers, when they have to drop a leash on a dog and move to another one, they're excited because they're getting a new dog and learning. hey, what's this personality, what's their traits, what's their little nicks and stuff like that. But at the same time, they're like, why aren't you like the other dog? You know.
Oh, comparison.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
That could be a danger, couldn't it?
Oh yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Okay. How did the experience change you?
Like the whole army
Well,
experience?
Well, obviously, but the experience in Afghanistan and Iraq.
It definitely opened up my eyes to stuff outside of here, because I think it's just how we are. We get comfortable in what we are, and you see something new and you're like, wow, that's and like we get comfortable with what we have, and then you go somewhere else and people don't have that, and you're like, how do you survive without that? Like so it kind of gives you a little bit more, at least for me, it gave me more appreciation of what I have and what I don't have, and like during deployments, there were some really bad days, so like when like small stuff happens now, I put it in perspective. It's kind of like, okay, well, it's not, yeah, it's bad, but it's not that bad. Like yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
Mhm.
Anything
Yeah.
unusual that you
Um,
thought at the time, this is weird?
Yeah, I mean, at the time I didn't think it was weird, but looking back at it now, is I never thought that 90 degrees would be cold,
Wow.
you know. But I remember it was in the middle of summer. It was like August, September timeframe or something like that. When in Iraq it's 120, 130 degrees
Yeah.
during the day, and you're wearing a full kit and everything, just sweating, And then at night it gets down to 90 degrees, and you're looking for a jacket.
Wow.
Because well, it's 40 degrees different. So you think if it's 80 degrees here and then it drops down to 40 degrees at night, you're gonna be cold.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's interesting. What was the best part of your military service?
Hands down, it was on all three of the deployments that I went on. Everybody that I was responsible for came home.
Wow, that
So
is
I mean, now there's people from the unit that didn't. I don't want to like mistake it or mislead or anything. But everybody that I was responsible for, they came home.
Yeah.
And I still talk to them to this day.
Do you chat, and do you have any kind of reunions or anything? Or
There are. I don't normally go to them because most of them are down in Texas at Fort Hood.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a trip.
That's kind of a trip, yeah.
And then plus when I was still in, it's kind of like, okay, I gotta get time off. I gotta take leave to go do that and all that. Now that it's I'm retired, I have that. But unfortunately, the 64th MP company that I was in is being disbanded.
Oh.
So I'm like, well, I can't go to any of those. But the battalion, they have reunions and stuff. And I've been kind of like looking into those, see if anybody I know would be going to it. I don't want to be the only one there that I know. Like, oh, okay.
True,
Yeah.
true. Yeah, I know what you mean. Where were you when your service ended? Now, you said you ended up here at Right Pad, or
just outside of Right Pad. I ended as the first sergeant for the Army Recruiting Company in Dayton. Where we covered from Dayton up to Springfield, down to Xenia, and all the way to the Indiana state line.
Would you consider yourself a successful recruiter?
Yeah, I mean,
do you have to meet numbers or anything? Or
yeah. There's goals that they give you, based off of your area, what it, the historical, how many people joined, and all that kind of stuff. Everybody always says, like I was successful. I look at that as like I did what my job was to do. At least I tried my best to do that. I don't ever look at it as if I was successful or not. I mean, I figured, they promoted me to E8, so I had been doing something right.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely, that's great. So did you go back home, or you just stayed in the area here? Or you were settled in the area?
Yeah, I just stayed here, and because I mean my wife's family's from the area.
Oh, okay.
So we when we got here, and then we were kind of, we moved here in 2021, so I was already 21 years in. So we were kind of like, do I want to keep doing this? Do you want to not keep doing this? And And then I had always said that, I'll know when it's time to retire is when I can't do what the soldiers do. Because I'm one of those that, if the soldiers are out doing something, I need to be able to go do it as a leader too. Because I'm not, just going to sit there. And then I ended up having to get 4 screws and 2 rods in my spine for a spinal fusion. So then I can't run, do a lot of that stuff. So I was like, okay, well, that's
it.
That's my body's way of telling me, like, you're done.
Wow. How did you adjust to civilian life?
It was a challenge at first, because when you're going through the retirement process, you normally they like you to, at least the Army, they like you to start about a year out from your retirement date, because there's a lot of stuff to go through trying to figure out, like, what are you gonna do for a job. I started mine about 9 months out, and then I was kind of lucky because I was recovering from my surgery, so I didn't have, like, really, that was my whole point. But then I started thinking, it's like, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And the military as a whole, all branches, they do an extremely phenomenal job on making sure you know how to write a resume when you get out. Make sure you know how to do a job interview. All, like, how to dress.
Really?
Yeah, you actually have to go through a week-long course on that. They teach you about all that, the benefits when you get out, like the VA stuff and all that stuff. They do a phenomenal job on that. And then, and I thought I was prepared, to retire. But then I heard it was the last senior enlisted member of the Air Force. I cannot remember her name, but I seen a video she did. And it struck a chord with me. Is what they don't do is prepare you for the emotional side, because when you get out, you're no longer, first sergeant, airman, staff sergeant, whatever. You're just who you are, so you have to find out who are you outside the uniform, so, and I struggled with that for a little while, just trying to figure out, like, well, just like when they were telling me, like, write a resume, and they're like, well, what'd you do as a first sergeant? I was like, oh, first sergeant stuff. I was like, what do you mean? What did I do? I'm like, oh, it's like, because there's so many different things. So I struggled with that for a while. I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I was like, oh, man. I was like, man. So then finally one day, my wife was like, all right, listen. She's like, you're having a bad day at work as a first sergeant. She's like, sergeant major just beat you up, yelling at you, all that kind of stuff. She's like, you can't come home. She's like, where are you going to go? Where are you going to go to kind of de-stress and bring your spirits back up? And I was like, well, I'm going to go talk to soldiers. Because I always loved being around soldiers. And she's like, you need to do something with that. So I was like, oh, okay. So I was already a member of the VFW. So I started getting more involved in that, in the local VFW. And then one day I just happened to walk into the Veteran Services office to ask questions for the VFW post. And they told me, like, well, I was like, yeah, I was retiring, still trying to find a job and all that. And they're like, well, we got an opening. I was like, huh, you don't say. So then I applied for that and got that. And then, so it keeps me in touch with that veteran community, and,
Absolutely.
so now it made once I got told, like, okay, yeah, hey, you're hired, like, yeah, I could almost feel like 9,000 pounds coming off my back. It just made the transition so much easier after that. Like, I was just didn't have a care in the world after that.
That is so awesome. Is there anything you have always wanted to share about your service or veteran experiences that you haven't?
Nah, I mean, like, through my times as a recruiter, a lot of people ask, like, what's the Army like? What's the Army like? Now, granted, I'm a little partial, so I'm always going to say the Army is the best branch, So, but I would say is anybody if you have a remote inkling to, like, hey, I want to serve my country, go talk to all the branches, because, like me, I thought I was going to join the Marines. Come to find out,
right.
I joined the Army and I loved it. I probably would have loved the Marines if I would join that, but I love the Army because that's why I joined. So you may, think like, hey, I want to join the Air Force, and you go talk to another branch and figure out, like, oh, well, this suits me better. I'll just tell everybody, just think about it. Just if, and people ask, the biggest question I always get, like, was it that bad? Is it that hard? I'm like, well, if it was that bad or that hard, I probably wouldn't have done it for 24 years.
Right.
I would have done my first 5 and got out. So it's what, like I said, back to what my grandpa taught me. It's what you make of it. If you wake up every day and you're like, oh, I hate this, you're gonna have a bad day.
Yeah.
But if you wake up and you're like, well, hey, whatever happened yesterday is yesterday's news. Today's a brand new day. A lot of people, that's why a lot of my soldiers always say, you're bipolar. Because I would get on them about something, and then I turn around and be like, say, hey, how's your family doing? And they're like, what just happened? But it's like that was like part of my leadership philosophy is like, when it's done, it's done. I'm not going to keep dragging it up and keep dragging it through the mud over something. Just fix it.
Yeah.
And
that's great.
Hmm.
So today you're still working at the
Veteran Services.
Veteran Services in Warren or
Miami County.
Miami County. Thank you. And how long have you been there now?
I just started there in July, so only a couple months, about 5 months now.
Yeah.
So still trying to learn and all the differences between the military jargon and ways we do things to how the civilian side operates. But it's great because there's 4 other veterans in there. It's a small office, 4 other veterans, so they all went through it too. So they know, like, hey, this is coming up. You're probably going to want to do this, but this is how we have to do it because of X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool, thanks.
Oh, wow.
So they help you transition and move through it too.
So they're mentoring you.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
How old are your kids now?
Just turned 16 and 17, just past July and August.
Wow. That's good. Are they glad that you're out of the military, or did they have any opinion about that? They just accepted it?
Well, I mean, yeah, they've like my oldest, when we moved here, he was a freshman. He started his freshman year here in Troy, and that was his 7th school that he had been in. So this is the longest as long as we've ever been anywhere. Most times 2-3 years.
Right.
Some places we were there for like a year, and it was like, you're moving. I was like, whoa. I was like, I'm still using GPS to get around. I don't even know where I'm going yet. So they were happy, but they were also sad at the same time because they knew that like that was my career. And that's what they've always known. So now it's a change for them too.
Sure.
But then they were also happy because they didn't have to move no more.
They could make friends permanently.
Yeah. They didn't have to go somewhere new. And oh man.
What would you like people to remember from your story?
Biggest thing is, I guess, if you have a dream, go for it. Because my dream was, I still remember I was probably 8, 9, maybe 10 years old, watching cops and seeing them send a dog on somebody and going, I want to do that. And that was my goal. It's like, I always want to be a canine officer. I always want to be a canine. I always want to be a canine officer. And it took 8 years, of being in the Army, but I finally did it. And I loved it.
Oh yeah.
So if you have a goal, you have a dream, go for it. Just go. It may not happen now, but you keep working for it. One of my mentors always told me is like, just be 1% better today than you were yesterday at one thing. Wow. And he's like, that adds up. That continues to add up. So that's what I do. Is I try to pick one thing, be 1% better than I was yesterday. Whether it could be something, that you think is small and minute, but it adds up and it continues to build for you.
Wow. That's really good. I have another question.
Okay.
Do you have dogs at home?
Well, yeah, I've had several. We used to have 2, but one was old age. We had to put him down. But the one we have now is a blue tick beagle.
Oh gosh.
And her name is Liberty. And then we had the dog we had with her as well was called Tank. So I mean, you kind of see a theme here.
Yeah, there is a theme.
Yeah. But he was built. He was a pit bull lab mix.
Oh yeah.
So he had the pit bull head, but he had a lab body, and he was built like a tank. So he would just bump into stuff and ow. But the other dog, Liberty, we actually at one of the recruiting stations I was at, she was running around eating out of a dumpster. It was just a stray dog.
Oh, okay.
And we ended up putting food out from the MREs, the packaged meals that the Army serves. We had a spaghetti one in our office, and we put it up the stairs. And then the door we had it propped open, and we had tied a cord on the top, and I hid around the corner. And when she got in, enough because she was eating as she was going. As she got inside enough, I pulled the string and shut the door. We were able to catch her. And then everybody else was kind of like, well, we don't really, can't really take a dog, can't really do it. So I took her, and then I was back in 2016.
Oh, wow.
So now we still have her, and then my youngest one, he always wanted a cat. So now somehow we got two. I don't know how that worked, but the original one we had was Maverick, and then we got another one and he called it Goose. And I'm like, all right, we gotta stop. The names are just, we gotta do it anymore.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much for coming in and talking to me.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.